Marcus Williams stood outside the gleaming corporate headquarters of Technovision Industries, his worn leather shoes barely holding together at the seams. The security guard behind the glass doors looked him up and down with obvious disdain, taking in his faded jeans, wrinkled shirt, and the beat-up messenger bag slung across his shoulder. Marcus had been here before, 3 times in the past month, each visit ending the same way, with polite dismissals and condescending smiles. His invention sat carefully wrapped in old newspapers inside that battered bag. Years of sleepless nights, countless failed prototypes, and every penny of his meager savings had gone into creating what he believed could revolutionize military communications. The device was small, no bigger than a smartphone, but it could encrypt and transmit data across vast distances without any existing infrastructure. In war zones or disaster areas where traditional communication networks failed, his creation could save lives. But nobody wanted to listen to a broken inventor from the wrong side of town. The receptionist, a perfectly manicured woman in her 30s, barely glanced up when Marcus approached her desk. She had seen him before and clearly remembered him as the persistent nobody who kept trying to get meetings with the executives. "Mr. Williams, isn't it?" she said with a forced smile that never reached her eyes. "I've already told you that Mr. Harrison doesn't take unsolicited meetings. If you want to pitch an idea, you need to go through proper channels." Marcus pulled out a folder containing technical specifications, patent applications, and performance test results. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear but from exhaustion. He had been working 3 part-time jobs to keep his small apartment and fund his research. The gas station night shifts, weekend construction work, and grocery store stocking barely covered his basic expenses, let alone the costly components needed for his prototypes. "Ma'am, I understand the protocol, but this is different," Marcus said, his voice steady despite his fatigue. "What I've created could change everything from military communications. I just need 10 minutes to demonstrate how it works." The receptionist's expression shifted from fake politeness to barely concealed irritation. "Mr. Williams, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. This is a professional establishment, not a place for amateur inventors to showcase their hobby projects." Her words stung, but Marcus had grown accustomed to such treatment. Every tech company in the city had given him similar responses. Some were more polite about it, others brutally direct, but the message was always the same. He didn't belong in their world of venture capital, angel investors, and corporate partnerships. As Marcus turned to leave, he overheard 2 executives talking near the elevator. They were discussing him, loud enough for him to hear, clearly intending for their words to reach his ears. "Did you see that guy again?" one of them said, laughing. "William something. He keeps coming here with some communication device he built in his garage. Security should ban him from the premises." "I heard he's been to every major tech company in the state," the other replied. "Nobody wants to waste time on a broke dreamer who probably learned electronics from YouTube videos. These people don't understand that real innovation requires real money, real education, and real connections." Their laughter followed Marcus out of the building and onto the busy sidewalk. He stood there for a moment, watching well-dressed professionals hurry past him without a second glance. In their world of expensive suits and luxury cars, he was invisible, a reminder of failure that they preferred to ignore. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from his landlord, reminding him that rent was due in 3 days. He checked his bank balance and felt his stomach drop. After buying components for his latest prototype upgrade, he had exactly $47.32 to his name. The part-time jobs barely covered his expenses, and he was already behind on utilities. Walking to the bus stop, Marcus reflected on how he had ended up in this situation. 5 years ago, he had been a promising engineering student at the state university, earning top grades and impressing his professors. But when his mother was diagnosed with cancer, everything changed. He dropped out to care for her and worked full-time to pay for her treatments that insurance wouldn't cover. She had passed away 2 years ago, leaving Marcus with crushing medical debt and no degree to show for his interrupted education. But she had always believed in his inventive mind, encouraging him to pursue his ideas even when others doubted him. Her final words to him were about never giving up on his dreams, no matter how impossible they seemed. The communication device in his bag represented 3 years of dedicated work since her death. He had taught himself advanced electronics through online courses, salvaged components from discarded equipment, and slowly refined his design through trial and error. The current prototype was his 7th iteration, and he knew it worked better than anything currently available to military units. But knowledge and passion weren't enough in a world that valued pedigree and connections over innovation. On the bus ride home to his cramped apartment, Marcus overheard other passengers talking about him. Word had spread in certain circles about the persistent inventor who kept showing up at tech companies with his mysterious device. Some people found his determination admirable, but most viewed him as a delusional dreamer who couldn't accept reality. "That's the guy who thinks he invented something revolutionary," whispered an elderly woman to her companion. "My grandson works at Data Flow Systems, and he said this Williams fellow has been pestering every major company for months. They say he's broke and desperate, probably trying to scam investors." Marcus closed his eyes and leaned against the window. Tomorrow, he would try again at another company. He had a list of 17 more businesses that might potentially be interested in his technology. Beyond that, he wasn't sure what options remained. His apartment building was in a neighborhood that most people avoided after dark. The hallways smelled of mold and cooking grease, and the elevator had been broken for 6 months. Marcus climbed 4 flights of stairs to his studio apartment, unlocking 3 separate deadbolts before stepping inside. The space was tiny but organized with military precision. One corner served as his laboratory, with electronic equipment carefully arranged on a folding table. Circuit boards, soldering tools, and testing devices filled plastic storage containers stacked against the wall. His bed was a mattress on the floor, and his kitchen consisted of a hot plate and mini refrigerator. Marcus unwrapped his device and connected it to his laptop for another round of testing. The green LED lights confirmed that all systems were functioning perfectly. Signal strength remained strong even when he took the device to the building's basement, and encryption protocols protected every transmission with unbreakable security. He had proven repeatedly that his invention worked as advertised, but proving its value to decision-makers required getting past gatekeepers who judged him by his appearance rather than his achievements. In their world, innovation came from well-funded research teams at prestigious institutions, not from broke individuals working alone in cramped apartments. Marcus opened his laptop and began researching military contractors and defense companies. Maybe the corporate world had rejected him, but perhaps organizations focused on practical applications rather than profit margins might see his device's potential. He spent the next several hours preparing new presentation materials and practice demonstrations. As midnight approached, Marcus allowed himself to imagine what success might look like. Not wealth or fame, but the satisfaction of knowing his creation could save lives in dangerous situations. Soldiers in remote locations could communicate with their command centers. Rescue teams could coordinate during natural disasters, and isolated communities could maintain contact with the outside world. His mother had taught him that true success meant using your talents to help others, not just to accumulate money or status. Every rejection and insult brought him closer to finding the right person who would recognize his device's potential. Somewhere out there, someone would see past his humble circumstances and focus on what his invention could accomplish. The next morning would bring another round of phone calls, another series of rejections, and probably more mockery from people who couldn't see beyond his financial situation. But Marcus had learned patience during his mother's illness and determination during the years of struggle that followed her death. He carefully wrapped his device for tomorrow's presentation, said a quiet prayer for strength, and tried to get some sleep on his mattress on the floor. In a few hours, he would face another day of skeptical receptionists, dismissive executives, and people who laughed at his dreams. But he wouldn't give up. He couldn't give up. Too much depended on his success, and failure simply wasn't an option. 6 weeks later, Marcus Williams found himself sitting in the waiting room of his 16th rejection. Dynamic Defense Solutions had kept him waiting for 2 hours before informing him that their lead engineer was too busy to see unsolicited presentations. The pattern had become painfully familiar. Initial interest over the phone, followed by cold dismissal once they saw him in person. His financial situation had deteriorated beyond desperate. The eviction notice taped to his apartment door gave him 72 hours to pay 3 months of back rent or face removal. His electricity had been shut off 5 days ago, forcing him to work by candlelight and charge his laptop at the public library. The part-time jobs barely covered food, and he had been surviving on dollar menu items and free samples from the grocery store where he worked weekends. Walking through downtown after another rejection, Marcus noticed people actively avoiding eye contact with him. His clothes, never expensive to begin with, now showed obvious signs of wear and financial hardship. The messenger bag containing his invention had developed new tears, held together with electrical tape that made it look even more suspicious to security guards and receptionists. At the public library, Marcus researched smaller companies and startups that might be more willing to take risks on unconventional inventors. But even these organizations had specific requirements about education, funding, and professional references that he couldn't meet. The technology industry operated on connections and credentials, not just on merit and innovation. His laptop battery was dying, and he didn't have money to buy a new charger when this one inevitably failed. Marcus carefully saved his research files to a flash drive, knowing that losing access to his computer would make continuing his search nearly impossible. Every aspect of modern business required digital communication, from initial contact through contract negotiations. That evening, Marcus attended a local inventors meetup group at the community center, hoping to find someone who might understand his situation or offer useful advice. The group consisted mainly of hobbyists working on consumer gadgets and retired engineers tinkering with pet projects. When Marcus described his military communication device, the response was polite but discouraging. Military contracts are incredibly difficult to secure, explained Robert Shun, a former defense contractor in his 70s. The procurement process takes years, requires extensive security clearances, and involves massive amounts of paperwork and compliance documentation. Even established companies struggle to break into that market. Plus, you need serious backing, added Sarah Martinez, who had successfully licensed her invention to a major manufacturer. Defense work requires insurance, bonding, and upfront capital that individual inventors simply can't provide. You might have a great product, but the business side is what kills most small inventors. Marcus listened to their advice with growing despair. Every practical consideration they mentioned represented another obstacle he couldn't overcome without money or corporate backing. The very companies that could provide such support were the same ones that had already rejected him based on his appearance and circumstances. After the meeting, Marcus walked home through neighborhoods that reminded him of his childhood. His mother had raised him in similar circumstances, working multiple jobs and struggling to pay bills while encouraging his interest in electronics and engineering. She had sacrificed everything to support his education, believing that his talents would eventually lift them both out of poverty. Now, despite his technical achievements, Marcus found himself in worse financial shape than his mother had ever been. The cruel irony wasn't lost on him that his revolutionary invention might die in obscurity simply because he lacked the resources to present it properly to the right people. His apartment building was dark when he arrived, a reminder that his electricity remained disconnected. Marcus climbed the stairs by the light of his phone's flashlight, carefully preserving battery life for emergencies. Inside his studio, he lit several candles and continued working on his presentation materials by their flickering light. The next morning brought devastating news. His landlord had filed legal papers to begin formal eviction proceedings, and Marcus received a court summons requiring his appearance within 10 days. If he couldn't pay the full amount owed plus legal fees, he would be forcibly removed from the apartment, and his belongings would be seized to offset the debt. Losing his apartment would mean losing his laboratory setup, his tools, and, most importantly, his prototype manufacturing capability. The equipment he had assembled over 3 years couldn't be easily replaced, and finding another location to continue his work seemed impossible without stable housing and electricity. Marcus spent that day making increasingly desperate phone calls to anyone who might listen. He contacted venture capital firms, angel investor groups, and technology incubators, but none would schedule meetings without seeing a formal business plan, financial projections, and proof of concept funding. The circular logic was maddening. He needed investment to create the documentation required to get investment. His search led him to research military contractors and defense companies with government connections. These organizations had the expertise to evaluate his device properly and the resources to bring it to market if they recognized its potential. But accessing decision-makers at these companies required connections he didn't possess. That afternoon, Marcus made a decision that reflected his desperation. He would attempt to demonstrate his device publicly, hoping to attract attention from someone with influence in the defense industry. The city was hosting a technology expo the following week, featuring displays from major corporations and presentations by industry leaders. Marcus couldn't afford the booth rental fees or official presentation slots, but he planned to attend as a visitor and find opportunities to showcase his invention informally. It was a long shot that could easily result in security removing him from the premises, but conventional approaches had failed completely. Preparing for the expo required using his last $20 for printing presentation materials and purchasing a decent shirt from a thrift store. Marcus practiced his demonstration repeatedly, timing it to show his device's capabilities within just a few minutes before security could intervene. The night before the expo, Marcus sat in his candlelit apartment, holding his invention and thinking about his mother's final encouragement to never give up on his dreams. Tomorrow would determine whether 3 years of work and sacrifice would result in opportunity or complete failure. He had exhausted almost every conventional option for finding backing or investment. The Technology Expo represented one of his last chances to connect with someone who could recognize his device's value and provide the support needed to bring it to market. If this attempt failed, Marcus wasn't sure what alternatives remained. The eviction deadline loomed just days away, and his financial resources had reached absolute zero. Even if someone showed interest in his invention, the legal and practical complications of a situation might prevent any deal from moving forward quickly enough to save him from homelessness. Marcus carefully packed his device, presentation materials, and laptop into his battered messenger bag. Tomorrow, he would walk into a room full of successful entrepreneurs, corporate executives, and investors who had never experienced financial desperation like his. He would try once more to convince someone that revolutionary ideas could come from unexpected places. Success would mean validation of his years of struggle and the beginning of a new chapter in his life. Failure would likely mean the end of his inventing career and a future of minimum wage jobs just to survive. The stakes couldn't be higher, and Marcus knew this might be his final opportunity to prove that innovation and determination could overcome poverty and prejudice. As he prepared for sleep on his mattress on the floor, Marcus allowed himself to imagine one more time what it would feel like to see his invention saving lives in military operations around the world. That vision had sustained him through every rejection, every humiliation, and every night of uncertainty about his future. Tomorrow would test whether dreams backed by genuine innovation could triumph over a system that favored wealth and connections above merit and potential. The Technology Expo buzzed with energy as hundreds of attendees moved between elaborate corporate displays showcasing the latest innovations. Marcus Williams felt completely out of place among the crowds of well-dressed professionals, venture capitalists, and industry executives. His thrift store shirt and worn shoes marked him as an outsider in this world of polished presentations and million-dollar deals. Security guards monitored the crowds carefully, and Marcus knew he had to be strategic about when and where to attempt his impromptu demonstration. He spent the first hour observing the flow of traffic, identifying areas where small groups gathered to discuss business opportunities away from the main exhibits. Near the military contractor section, Marcus noticed several men in uniform examining communication equipment displays. Their conversation focused on current limitations in battlefield communications and the ongoing search for more reliable solutions in hostile environments. This was exactly the audience he needed to reach, but approaching them directly would likely result in immediate removal by security. Marcus positioned himself near a coffee station where these potential contacts might pass during breaks between presentations. His plan was simple, but risky. Engage them in conversation about communication challenges and naturally steer the discussion toward a solution. If they showed genuine interest, he could arrange a private demonstration outside the expo hall. General Patricia Hayes, a distinguished woman in her 50s wearing military dress uniform, paused at the coffee station during a break between vendor meetings. She had spent the morning evaluating communication systems that promised revolutionary advances, but delivered only incremental improvements over existing technology. Her expression showed the fatigue of someone who had endured countless sales pitches that overpromised and underdelivered. Marcus recognized this as his opportunity. Taking a deep breath, he approached the general with respectful confidence, addressing her by rank after reading her nameplate. "General Hayes, I couldn't help but overhear your concerns about communication reliability in hostile environments," Marcus said, his voice steady despite his nervousness. "I'm wondering if you've encountered situations where existing infrastructure completely failed, leaving units unable to coordinate with command centers." The general studied Marcus carefully, taking in his modest appearance while considering his surprisingly knowledgeable question. "That's an ongoing challenge in modern warfare," she replied cautiously. "Current systems depend too heavily on fixed infrastructure that becomes unreliable when damaged or compromised." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. What if there was a way to maintain secure communication without any existing infrastructure? A device that could create its own network and maintain encrypted contact across vast distances, even in completely hostile environments. General Hayes's interest sharpened. She had heard similar claims from major defense contractors, but their solutions always involved expensive installations and complex maintenance requirements. That would be extremely valuable, but every system I've evaluated has significant limitations. Either the range is inadequate, the security is questionable, or the cost makes large-scale deployment impossible. Would you be interested in seeing a working prototype that addresses all three of those concerns?" Marcus asked, carefully removing his device from the messenger bag. "This system requires no infrastructure, maintains military-grade encryption, and costs a fraction of existing alternatives." The general's eyebrows rose as she examined the compact device. It looked nothing like the bulky communication systems she was accustomed to evaluating. "Where did you develop this?" she asked, clearly intrigued by its unconventional design. Marcus felt his cheeks redden slightly. "I built it in my apartment over the past 3 years. I know that probably sounds unprofessional, but the technology speaks for itself. Would you be willing to see a quick demonstration?" Something in Marcus's honest, straightforward manner impressed General Hayes. She had dealt with countless smooth-talking sales representatives and corporate executives who promised impossible things with absolute confidence. This young man's humble admission about his circumstances suggested either complete honesty or sophisticated reverse psychology. "I have 15 minutes before my next meeting," she said, glancing around the crowded expo hall. "But not here. Too many people, too much interference. Is there somewhere more private where you can show me how this works?" Marcus's heart raced with excitement and nervous energy. "There's a parking lot outside the east entrance. I can demonstrate full functionality in under 10 minutes, including range testing and security protocols." They walked together through the expo hall, drawing curious glances from other attendees who wondered why a distinguished general was leaving with someone who clearly didn't belong at such a high-level event. Marcus ignored the stares, focusing entirely on the upcoming demonstration that could change everything. In the parking lot, Marcus powered up his device and handed General Hayes a matching unit. These can maintain contact across any distance where we can establish line-of-sight communication towers, but they also work independently using satellite relay protocols I've developed. Every transmission is encrypted using algorithms that adapt continuously. General Hayes examined the second device with growing interest. "Show me," she said simply. Marcus walked to the far end of the parking lot, nearly 200 yards away, while the general remained near the building entrance. Using his device, he transmitted a complex data file containing technical specifications, performance metrics, and detailed schematics. The transmission completed in under 30 seconds, with perfect clarity and no signal degradation. "Did you receive the complete file?" Marcus asked through the device's voice communication system. General Hayes checked her unit and found the transmitted documents intact and clearly readable. "Impressive range and clarity," she responded. "But what about security? How do I know this transmission couldn't be intercepted?" Marcus activated several diagnostic screens on his device. Every transmission uses dynamically generated encryption keys that change with each message. Even if someone intercepted the signal, they would need quantum computing resources to break the encryption before the keys changed again. It's mathematically impossible with current technology. The general spent several minutes testing different functions and examining the transmitted technical data. What she saw challenged everything she thought she knew about portable communication technology. The device's capabilities exceeded those of systems costing millions of dollars to develop and deploy. "This is remarkable work," General Hayes said as Marcus rejoined her. "The applications for military operations would be game-changing. Remote units could maintain constant contact with command centers, special operations teams could coordinate in complete radio silence, and disaster response teams could communicate when all other systems failed." Marcus felt a surge of hope unlike anything he had experienced in months of rejections. "I've tried to interest defense contractors and technology companies, but nobody would take me seriously without corporate backing or advanced degrees. That's their loss and potentially our gain," the general replied with a slight smile. "Innovation often comes from unexpected sources. Some of our most effective military technologies were developed by individuals working independently, not by massive corporate research teams." She paused, studying Marcus thoughtfully. "What would you need to move this from prototype to production-ready systems?" The question caught Marcus off guard. After months of people dismissing his work without consideration, someone was actually asking about implementation rather than credentials. Manufacturing partnerships, testing resources, and probably regulatory approval for military applications. "I understand the technical requirements, but I don't have experience with procurement processes or security clearance procedures." General Hayes nodded. "Those are all manageable challenges with the right support. What's not manageable is finding technology this advanced. I've been searching for exactly this kind of capability for the past 2 years." She looked at her watch and frowned. "I need to get back to my scheduled meetings, but I want to continue this conversation. Would you be available to meet with my technical evaluation team next week? They would need to run comprehensive tests and verify all your claims, but this initial demonstration suggests you've solved problems that major corporations haven't been able to address." Marcus could barely contain his excitement. "I'm available anytime, General. This device has been tested extensively, and I'm confident it will exceed any performance requirements you might have." General Hayes handed him her business card. "Call my office Monday morning and speak with Colonel Rodriguez, my chief technical advisor. Tell him I've authorized a full evaluation of your communication system and that it's a priority project." As they walked back toward the expo hall, the general asked about Marcus's background and the development process for his invention. She seemed genuinely interested in his self-taught engineering education and the personal sacrifices he had made to pursue his research. "One more thing," General Hayes said as they reached the building entrance. Don't let anyone discourage you from continuing this work. The military needs innovators who think differently and solve problems creatively. Your background and circumstances don't diminish the value of what you've created. Marcus watched her disappear into the crowded expo hall, still hardly believing what had just transpired. 3 years of rejections and humiliation had ended with a 15-minute parking lot demonstration to someone who actually understood the significance of his invention. He looked at the general's business card and felt tears of relief welling up in his eyes. For the first time since his mother's death, Marcus allowed himself to believe that his dreams might actually become reality. Monday morning arrived with Marcus Williams standing outside the Pentagon's visitor entrance, clutching General Hayes's business card and fighting waves of nervous anticipation. The weekend had passed in a blur of preparation, reviewing technical documentation and trying to process the reality that his invention would finally receive serious evaluation from military experts. Colonel Maria Rodriguez, General Hayes's chief technical advisor, met Marcus in a lobby with a team of 3 engineers and 2 communication specialists. Her demeanor was professional but friendly, suggesting that the general had briefed her thoroughly about Marcus's device and its potential applications. Mr. Williams, General Hayes speaks very highly of your communication system, Colonel Rodriguez said as they walked through security checkpoints. We've prepared a comprehensive testing facility where we can evaluate every aspect of your technology under controlled conditions. The testing laboratory exceeded anything Marcus had imagined. Banks of sophisticated equipment lined the walls, capable of measuring signal strength, analyzing encryption protocols, and simulating battlefield communication scenarios. Multiple isolated testing chambers allowed for range verification and interference resistance evaluation. Marcus unpacked his device with hands that trembled slightly from adrenaline. After months of desperate attempts to interest anyone in his work, he now faced experts who possessed both the knowledge to understand his achievement and the authority to act on their conclusions. Let's start with basic functionality, said Dr. James Peterson, the lead communications engineer. We'll establish baseline performance metrics before moving to advanced capabilities. The first round of testing focused on signal clarity and transmission range. Marcus's device maintained perfect communication quality across distances that exceeded the specifications of much more expensive military equipment. The testing team exchanged glances that suggested impressed surprise as they documented performance metrics that challenged their expectations. The range capability alone justifies further evaluation, Dr. Peterson noted, recording measurements that showed Marcus's system outperforming comparable devices by significant margins. But range without security means nothing in military applications. Let's examine your encryption protocols. This was the moment Marcus had been anticipating most anxiously. His encryption system represented his most innovative breakthrough, but also his most technically complex achievement. If these experts found flaws in his security implementation, the entire project could be dismissed regardless of other capabilities. Marcus activated the encryption analysis mode and handed Colonel Rodriguez a monitoring device that would display the mathematical foundations of his security protocols. The system generates new encryption keys every few seconds using quantum-derived random number sequences. Even with unlimited computing power, intercepted signals become mathematically unbreakable before analysis can be completed. The military cryptographers spent over an hour attempting to crack test transmissions using every technique in their arsenal. Advanced computer systems that routinely broke commercial encryption standards couldn't even begin to analyze Marcus's dynamically changing security protocols. This is extraordinary work, admitted Captain Sarah Chun, the team's senior cryptographer. Your encryption implementation exceeds classification requirements for the most sensitive military communications. How did you develop these algorithms? Marcus explained his approach to cryptographic security, drawing on mathematical principles he had learned through online courses and specialized forums. The self-taught nature of his education became an asset rather than a liability. allowing him to combine techniques in ways that formally trained cryptographers might not consider. The testing continued throughout the morning, with each evaluation revealing capabilities that exceeded the team's expectations. Marcus's device maintained secure communications through electronic jamming, physical obstacles, and atmospheric interference that would disable conventional military equipment. During a break for lunch, Colonel Rodriguez pulled Marcus aside for a private conversation. "I need to ask you directly, is there any possibility that this technology could have been developed with foreign assistance or influence? The capabilities we're seeing surpass anything in our current inventory." Marcus understood the security implications of her question. "Colonel, I can provide complete documentation of my development process, including purchase receipts for every component and timestamps for every design iteration. This technology was developed entirely by me, working alone in my apartment." "I believe you," she replied. "But understand that technology this advanced will require extensive background investigations and security clearances before any formal partnership can be established. Are you prepared for that level of scrutiny?" The afternoon testing focused on practical military applications. The team created scenarios simulating battlefield conditions, disaster response operations, and special forces missions where conventional communication systems would fail completely. Marcus's device performed flawlessly in every situation, providing capabilities that could revolutionize military communications. As the formal evaluation concluded, General Hayes joined the group to review preliminary findings. The enthusiasm in the testing team's voices was unmistakable as they described performance metrics and potential applications. "Mr. Williams," the general said after reviewing the technical reports, "what you've created represents a significant advancement in military communication technology. Subject to final security clearances and contract negotiations, we're prepared to offer you a development partnership that would bring this system into active military service." Marcus felt dizzy with relief and excitement. "General, I'm honored by your confidence and ready to move forward with whatever process is required." The next steps involve formal contract discussions, patent protections, and manufacturing arrangements, Colonel Rodriguez explained. "We'll need to establish a proper development facility and provide you with the resources necessary to scale production for military deployment." General Hayes handed Marcus a folder containing preliminary contract documents and contact information for the Pentagon's Technology Acquisition Department. These documents outline our standard partnership terms for revolutionary technologies. Review them carefully and let us know if you have questions or concerns. The monetary figures in the contract documents exceeded Marcus's wildest expectations. The initial development payments alone would solve his immediate financial crisis and provide resources for advanced research facilities. The long-term royalty arrangements could provide financial security for the rest of his life. More importantly than money, the contract offered something Marcus had been seeking for 3 years: validation that his work had genuine value and could make a meaningful difference in the world. Military units in dangerous situations would benefit directly from his innovation, potentially saving countless lives through improved communication capabilities. As Marcus prepared to leave the Pentagon, General Hayes offered one final observation. "Mr. Williams, you've demonstrated something that large corporations with unlimited budgets couldn't achieve. Innovation doesn't require massive research teams or expensive facilities. It requires intelligence, creativity, and determination, qualities you've shown in abundance." Walking through the Pentagon's corridors toward the exit, Marcus reflected on the dramatic transformation his life had undergone in just 1 week. 7 days ago, he had been facing eviction and complete failure. Now he held contracts that would establish him as a legitimate defense technology developer. The irony wasn't lost on him that the same corporations and investors who had dismissed him so casually would likely attempt to purchase his technology or hire him once news of the military contract became public. But Marcus had learned valuable lessons about recognizing people who judged ideas based on merit rather than appearances. Outside the Pentagon, Marcus called his landlord to arrange immediate payment of all outstanding rent and fees. The eviction proceedings could be canceled, and his apartment laboratory could continue operating while he established more sophisticated facilities. That evening, sitting in his apartment with electricity restored and his financial crisis resolved, Marcus carefully packaged his device and supporting documentation for shipment to the Pentagon's Secure Development Facility. Tomorrow would begin a new chapter in his life, working with military engineers to refine his invention for active service deployment. Marcus thought about his mother and how proud she would be to see her son's determination finally rewarded. Her belief in his potential had sustained him through the darkest periods of doubt and rejection. Now, her encouragement had been vindicated by experts who recognized the true value of his work. The young man who had been laughed at for being broke and dismissed for lacking credentials was now a defense technology contractor whose invention could change military communications forever. Success had come not through connections or wealth, but through persistence, innovation, and the courage to continue believing in his dreams despite overwhelming obstacles. 6 months later, Marcus Williams stood in his new state-of-the-art laboratory facility, watching military technicians conduct final testing on the production version of his communication device. The transformed space bore no resemblance to his cramped apartment workshop, featuring sophisticated manufacturing equipment, climate-controlled storage areas, and security systems befitting a classified defense contractor. The Pentagon had moved quickly to establish Marcus as an official technology partner, providing funding for a proper research facility and a team of qualified engineers to assist with large-scale production. His invention, now designated as the Adaptive Field Communication System, had passed every military evaluation and received approval for immediate deployment to combat units worldwide. Marcus wore a crisp business suit that still felt foreign after years of threadbare clothing, but his confidence had grown alongside his professional appearance. The young man who once begged for 5 minutes of an executive's time now commanded respect from colonels, generals, and defense industry leaders who sought his expertise on advanced communication technologies. General Hayes visited the facility regularly to monitor progress and ensure that production schedules met military deployment requirements. Her early recognition of Marcus's potential had launched her own career advancement, and she took evident pride in her role as his initial supporter and advocate. The first shipment of 500 units will reach active combat zones next week, she informed Marcus during her latest visit. Field commanders are eager to test your system in real operational conditions. Marcus reviewed the deployment schedule with satisfaction. Each device represented months of additional refinement and improvement, incorporating feedback from military communication specialists and battle-tested reliability requirements. The production version exceeded even his original prototype's capabilities while maintaining the simplicity and durability essential for battlefield use. "General, I'd like to accompany the first deployment if possible," Marcus said. Seeing the system in actual combat conditions would provide valuable data for future improvements. General Hayes smiled. "I was hoping you'd request that. Colonel Rodriguez has arranged for you to observe operations in Afghanistan next month, where your devices will undergo the ultimate real-world testing." The financial transformation in Marcus's life had been equally dramatic. The military contract had provided immediate relief from poverty, but the long-term royalty agreements promised sustained wealth that would last for decades. More importantly, technology companies that had previously dismissed him now competed aggressively to license his innovations for commercial applications. Technovision Industries, the same company whose receptionist had rudely ejected Marcus months earlier, had submitted a proposal offering $20 million for exclusive civilian licensing rights. Marcus had politely declined, preferring to maintain control over his technology while working with partners who treated him with genuine respect. The irony of his transformation wasn't lost on Marcus as he reviewed meetings requests from corporate executives who had once laughed at his circumstances. Their attitudes had changed completely once news of the military contract spread through industry circles. But Marcus remembered every slight and dismissal he had endured during his desperate months of seeking support. During a recent technology conference, Marcus encountered several individuals who had treated him poorly during his struggle for recognition. Their attempts to claim partial credit for his success or establish retroactive friendships were met with polite but firm rebuffs. Success had taught Marcus to value authentic relationships over opportunistic networking. Dr. Robert Chun, the elderly inventor from the community meetup group, had become an unexpected mentor and advisor. His warnings about the challenges of military contracting had proven accurate, but his encouragement to persevere had been equally valuable. Marcus had hired Dr. Chun as a consultant, providing him with financial security while gaining access to his decades of experience with government contracts. "Remember when you thought this was impossible?" Dr. Chun asked during one of their weekly strategy meetings. "Your persistence changed everything. Most people would have given up after the first few rejections." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "The rejections taught me to focus on the technology rather than seeking validation from people who couldn't understand its potential." General Hayes succeeded where venture capitalists failed because she evaluated the device based on military needs rather than my personal circumstances. The success had also allowed Marcus to address the medical debts that had driven him into poverty initially. His mother's hospital bills, which had seemed insurmountable during his desperate period, were now resolved completely. Marcus had also established a charitable foundation providing scholarships for engineering students from low-income backgrounds, ensuring that financial circumstances wouldn't prevent other talented inventors from pursuing their dreams. Word of Marcus's transformation had spread through his old neighborhood, inspiring other struggling inventors and entrepreneurs to continue pursuing their goals despite difficult circumstances. He regularly spoke at community centers and technical schools, sharing his story and encouraging young people to persist through obstacles that seemed overwhelming. "Innovation doesn't require wealth or connections," Marcus would tell audiences of aspiring inventors. "It requires curiosity, determination, and the courage to keep working when everyone else thinks you're wasting your time." "My most important breakthrough came not in a corporate laboratory, but in a tiny apartment with borrowed equipment and secondhand components." The same messenger bag that had once made him appear unprofessional now sat in a display case in his office, serving as a reminder of his humble beginnings and the importance of judging people by their ideas rather than their appearances. Marcus had kept several of his old prototypes as well, documenting the evolution of his technology from crude first attempts to sophisticated military systems. As production of the adaptive field communication system reached full capacity, Marcus began developing next-generation improvements, incorporating lessons learned from initial military deployments. Feedback from combat units provided insights that laboratory testing couldn't duplicate, driving innovations that enhanced performance under extreme conditions. Major defense contractors had submitted partnership proposals worth hundreds of millions of dollars, seeking to collaborate with Marcus on advanced communication technologies for future military applications. Unlike his desperate months of seeking any form of recognition, Marcus now had the luxury of choosing partners whose values and expertise aligned with his long-term vision. The transformation extended beyond professional success to personal fulfillment that had been missing during his years of struggle. Marcus had moved from his cramped apartment to a comfortable home near his laboratory, but he maintained the disciplined work habits and modest lifestyle that had sustained him through difficult times. Each morning, Marcus began his day by reviewing progress reports from military units using his communication system. Letters from soldiers describing how the technology had saved lives or enabled successful mission completion provided more satisfaction than any financial reward. His invention was fulfilling its intended purpose of protecting people in dangerous situations. General Hayes had nominated Marcus for several prestigious awards recognizing technological innovation and contributions to military effectiveness. The ceremonies and recognition felt surreal to someone who had once been dismissed as a delusional dreamer, but they validated his belief that persistence and innovation could overcome any obstacle. Looking back at his journey from poverty to success, Marcus understood that the rejections and humiliations had been necessary elements of his growth. Each dismissal had strengthened his determination and refined his understanding of what truly mattered in life. Success achieved easily might not have been valued as highly as success earned through struggle and sacrifice. The young man who had once been laughed at for being broke now employed over 50 people in his expanding technology company, providing good jobs in his economically struggling neighborhood. His success had created opportunities for others while proving that revolutionary innovations could emerge from the most unexpected circumstances. Marcus Williams had transformed from a desperate inventor begging for recognition into a respected defense contractor whose technologies protected military personnel worldwide. The general had indeed bought him out, but not in the way his early critics had mockingly predicted. Instead of exploiting a desperate situation, General Hayes had recognized genuine value and provided the partnership that allowed Marcus's invention to reach its full potential. The transformation was complete, but the work continued. Marcus knew that his greatest innovations lay ahead, building on the foundation of success while never forgetting the lessons learned during his darkest period of struggle and determination.